That's good. Is anyone not here? Very good. So welcome to this morning's talk. And the talk I wanted to deliver this afternoon, or this morning, was I've been focusing a lot on just, on the meditation, how to make your mind peaceful and how to kind of let go and weaken the 5 hindrances. But then afterwards, we have, what I've mentioned in brief, in passing, but the important part, which the insights, the understandings, how they come about, and how they not just weaken defilements, but how they overcome them completely. And one of the things I remember when I first started studying Buddhism more formally was to notice that in the sutras called the Anguttara Nikaya, they had all these factors of Dhamma all listed up, the ones, the twos, the threes, the fours. And I was really surprised, kind of shocked, when I looked at the section called eights. I thought, surely there you see the most important group of 8 factors in Buddhism, which was the Eightfold Path. And there wasn't not one sutta about the Eightfold Path in the group of 8s. And that was kind of, what's going on here? So when I looked and carried on reading, because I made this resolution, not just to read parts, but read just a whole lot. If it was boring, if I'd heard it before, I'm just going to read it to see what's there. I'm glad I did things like that, because that's where you found out the Eightfold Path wasn't in the 8s. It was in the group of 10s. And I thought, why? And when you look at it a bit more carefully, you find the 8s. That's the Eightfold Path. That's kind of the path. That's the way you go. Now what do you find at the end? What's the result of the path? And that's where you get the last 2 factors. Which is, I kind of like these factors, like the right understanding, right liberation. That's the 9th. And the 10th is the knowledge of liberation. And I like the way those 2 go together, or actually one after the other. And it says that if you get to that 9th factor, after the Eightfold Path, then the 9th factor will arise, and then the 10th factor arises. I like the idea of the 10th factor arising, automatically, because we always had this debate when I was a young Buddhist, kind of misinformed. Can you be enlightened without knowing it? And it's just answering, no. Once enlightenment is there, you know you're enlightened. And one of the other parts of that Eightfold Path, misunderstanding that's a path and that has a result, was the fact in that same group of suttas in the 10s of the Anguttara Nikaya, they had this beautiful way of expressing how this is an automatic process. And I'm now going to read that out. It's not a sutta class, but nevertheless, we had these books. I would hand these out, the word of the Buddha, my translation of some of these suttas. Only I feel a bit guilty because they have been re-edited. There was a few typing mistakes and edits on this. So there's another one coming out soon. But if anyone wants any of these older copies, they're still pretty good. Are they? Well, I've got to get... I can't say myself. I can't, because they've got boxes of them in the teacher's cottage, and I'm trying to get rid of them. Honestly, I can't hide my motives. Anyway, This is the sutta which I first saw this in Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation when he titled this sutta, Enlightenment is a Natural Process. I kind of like that because we put so much will and energy and striving into whatever we do. And this sutta from the Buddha was kind of rejecting that. Anyway, I read out. This is in the tens. It's the second sutta in the tens. Is that right? Yeah. Meditators. And I say meditators because a lot of the time the Buddha addresses this thing as monks. Do the nuns not meditate? Do lay people not meditate? Just by making a small few changes like that, it means it's relevant to everybody. And it's not relevant to people who study, but to people who actually do the meditation. Meditators, please listen because this is powerful. When one is virtuous, one does not need to will, let me be free from regret. It is natural that one who is virtuous becomes free from regret. It's obvious, isn't it? If you're a virtuous person, a good person, and you don't harm others or harm yourself, then you don't regret anything. When one is free from regret, one does not need to will, let me be happy. And that word is like pamoja. And sometimes with some people I give them, they want a party name, and I thought that's a lovely party name, pamoja. It is natural that one who is free from regret becomes happy. And the word for natural is like tamatha. And there's a word in Thai which we grow up with, like tamada, means it has to happen. It's not when the rain falls, the ground gets wet. That's natural. So you don't need to will. When the rain falls, oh, may the ground get wet. When one is free from regret, one becomes happy. When one is happy, one does not need to will, let me be joyful. This is the word piti. It is natural that one who is virtuous becomes joyful. And actually they missed out the happiness there, but this is pretty good. One becomes joyful when one is virtuous. And I do remember years and years ago when we used to hold our retreats in Safety Bay. And the only place we could find to hold that retreat was an old Catholic, it was like a little holiday camp for priests who got a bit tired. It was run by nuns. And it was on the beach, not looking at the beach. It was nice and quiet. And I remember doing the interviews there on one weekend. And when one person had finished, another one hadn't arrived yet for the interview, I just looked through the window. And next to this retreat center, there was a church. And I saw two men. They'd just been to the Sunday service. And they shook hands. And as they were saying goodbye, one of them said to the other, "Be good." And the other one said, "No, that's no fun." And I don't know, that little saying, "Be good, no, that's no fun," it kind of stuck with me. And I found that very sad. Being good, being virtuous is more fun. It's like your average level of fun and joy actually increases when you're virtuous. And that's a kind of insight which the Buddha's obviously saying in places like this, which a lot of people miss. There's a certain amount of joy comes from being virtuous. I know one of the things which I always remember is that, when I was a young man, as a kid, I was about 6 or 7 years of age, and when anyone knocked on the door of my father's small apartment, it was a council house, really small, I would always run to the door to answer the door. And on this occasion, I ran to the door, and there was 2 British policemen outside. 2 of them, in the full uniform, in the hats and everything else. And they asked me, "Is your daddy at home?" "Yes, in the front room." "So can we see him?" I said, "Yeah." And I was a bit surprised. You didn't get policemen visiting my home that often. But anyway, they went into the front room to see my father. And about 1 or 2 minutes later, there was another knock on the door, and I answered it, and there was another 2 policemen outside. "Can we see your father?" "Yeah, he's in the front room talking to 2 of your friends." I was only about 5 or 6 or something, I can't remember the age, but I started to get worried. And when there was a knock on the door again, or the doorbell rang, and I answered it, another 2 policemen. And now I was really concerned. And that wasn't the end of it. A few moments later, another 2 policemen knocked, "Can we see your father?" And I thought, no, this is too much. So they went into the room to see my father, and I couldn't help myself, opening the door, almost saying, "Please don't take my daddy away. I don't know what he's done. He's not a violent man." But 8 policemen talking to him in the room. And then when I saw what they were up to, all that fear disappeared. It was like many things. We see a few pieces of evidence and we misinterpret it. We misunderstand it. When I saw what was happening, they were all watching the TV. The 8 policemen and my daddy. It was in UK, it was the FA Cup final day. And those policemen were supposed to be on the beat, walking the streets, to keep the suburbs safe from thieves and things. But if you ever notice how people would love that football match, my father knew one of them and said, "Hey, you don't need to be on the beat. Come to my house, you can watch the TV. I won't say anything." So that's what they were all doing. The policemen were misbehaving, not my daddy. And it was true, because the policemen never needed to be on the beat at that time of the day, because all the thieves as well, all the robbers, they were watching their football match as well. Dan, you know what UK is like. When they have a football match, they have to watch it. So anyway, that was a good example of how you can get fear, and there's no real cause for it. So when one is virtuous, you never need to worry. In other words, you're happy. You have a natural form of happiness just because you're good. So if anybody ever tells you, be good, and you say, "No, that's no fun," it's actually more fun being happy. Even sometimes, a couple of times, policemen have turned up at Bodhinyana Monastery. Sometimes, why? And I notice that sometimes a few visitors, as soon as they see the police car arrive, they go around the back somewhere. What have you been up to? Sometimes I remember Brian Creek. He passed away, but he made me the executor of the will, so they had to contact me. And so all these are very sort of normal things, but sometimes that's what happens, that people get afraid. Because there's some things, did they pay their parking fines or what? And they always have that lack of happiness, that lack of freedom. That's why it's wonderful when you don't have that fear or that sense of guilt or regret. You are far more happy, you feel more free. So when one is joyful, when one is happy, one does not need to will, "Let me be joyful." It is natural that one who is virtuous becomes joyful. When one is joyful, one does not need to will, "Let me be tranquil." This is passaddhi. It is natural that one who is joyful becomes tranquil. This is where we start to see how you can sit still. Your body is tranquil, and your mind becomes tranquil. You don't need to think so much. Even your body becomes much more peaceful. There are two types of tranquility they always say here, kaya passaddhi and citta passaddhi. The calmness of the body and the calmness of the mind. And so it's wonderful. Sometimes I open my eyes and during meditation have a look at you. And when you're meditating, you're still. Your body is tranquil. You're still breathing. You're still, heart is still beating. But you can see it so quietly. And honestly, how many people in the world can do that? Many years ago, when we had our previous abbot, Ajahn Brahm, for those of you who remember him, we never told him this, but when he was meditating, we took a video of him without his consent. And once we took the video of him, in those days we could actually play it fast forward. We showed it to him afterwards, we confessed, but what was happening when we did it fast forward, it was just like it was going at normal speed. There was hardly any movements. And if you do a picture of anybody, even now, when you're scratching or putting on your jumper or whatever you're doing, those movements become kind of exaggerated, like you're all over the place. And it's wonderful to see how tranquil you could be when you were joyful. And for one who is tranquil, now this is where the meditation part comes up, which is really good. When one is joyful, one doesn't need to will, let me be tranquil, sorry. It is natural that one who is joyful becomes tranquil. When one is tranquil, one does not need to will. You don't choose, you don't want, you don't strive. Let me feel mental pleasure. This is my translation here for sukha. It is natural that one who is tranquil experiences a mental pleasure. That's a stillness of the body, calmness of the mind. It's very, very pleasurable. And when one experiences mental pleasure, one does not need to will. Let me enter jhana. It is natural that one who experiences mental pleasure enters jhana. Now you're paying more attention. I don't know how many days of the retreat left, only a couple left. Have you got that jhana yet? If you're not experiencing the mental pleasure, it's very difficult. If you start thinking, what do I have to do? Be quiet and enjoy this moment. And you don't will it, it happens naturally. And now we get to the reason why I'm giving this talk today about the insights, the understandings which come up. Because people often ask me, when you've experienced the jhana, then how do you switch to vipassana meditation? What do you do? And a lot of the time I say, nothing. Just relax and see what happens. And this is how the Buddha taught. You don't suddenly decide to do something different. When one has experienced jhana, one does not need to will. Let me see things as they really are. It is natural that one who has experienced jhana will see things as they truly are. It's natural, you can't avoid it. So I'm sorry, that's why I say if you've experienced the jhana, you're going to lose your hair. It's natural. That's why it's lovely to see who's getting more and more bald over here. It's a sign that your meditation's doing pretty well. Don't worry when you go home, you can always wear a wig. When you see things as they really are, one does not need to will. Let me experience nibbida and fading away. Nibbida is like pushing you away from the usual world, pushing you away from things you get attached to. It's a negative term. Sometimes I prefer the translation, repulsion. It's what throws you off the wheel of samsara. If you don't experience that nibbida, turning away from the things of the world, that you think, what am I doing this for? You might, when you go back home, you might get invited to a party or something. So, what do I want to do this for? There's a sense of, I don't belong in that place, but I belong in a place of much more freedom. I call it samsara's ejection seat. You press the nibbida button, and you're off. If you don't press anything, you keep going round and round. And fading away. And I love this word, fading away. Because once it pushes you off, things which you thought were so important start to disappear. That's like you have the insights, but the insights push you off the wheel and things just disappear. They fade away, they're not important to you anymore. And I love that thing about describing this as a letting go, as the things vanishing, not attaining more things, but things disappearing. And that's why I often advise you. And just because I advise you, that's all I need to do. Brainwash you. And then when things happen in meditation, you come out, then you think, what things have vanished? What things had you owned before which you don't own anymore? When you stop owning things, life becomes so much more free and so much more peaceful. And one of those examples, I think I mentioned it to you, is because I got so busy looking after these places, I apologize in front of the bhikkhunis and seminaries. When was the last time I got to Dhammasana? A long time ago. And the reason is because you do get so many places you have to look after. Mostly you've got the city centre, Nolamara, and obviously Jhana Grove and Bodhinyana Monastery. There's a lot of monks there. So, those days I used to teach at Dhammaloka most weekends, and obviously do retreats here and overseas, and also to look after Bodhinyana Monastery, being like construction manager, builder and all sorts of stuff. And so because at that time I realized I was getting really tired, not only tired, but I remember visitors coming. The other day we had some Sri Lankan monks visiting. I could hardly spend any time with them at all. And sometimes it's visitors like you come and want to see the monastery, how is it? And then when you come, you say, oh, what a beautiful monastery Bodhinyana Monastery is. Do you think it's beautiful? Yes. Really? Years ago when people started to say that to me, I thought, you must be crazy, you don't live here. Because as the head monk of Bodhinyana Monastery, when anything ever went wrong, there was a leak in the plumbing, or there was something fell off the roof, or a tree fell down, or there was a monk going a bit sick, or there was needed somebody to go to the house quickly because there was a tragedy, or there was something else goes on, I was the one they would come and find and ask. I was like the boss. This is where the buck stops. So, and even the committee are very nice, but eventually they asked me what we should do. So for me, Bodhinyana Monastery was my workplace, my office, my consulting studio, everything. And so whenever you were walking with me, say, what a beautiful monastery, how peaceful it is. And I was thinking, you must be joking. There's so many monks at that monastery, so many nuns visiting. I've got to give awadas to the nuns, and it's overseas they want some advice. They want to invite me here, there, all over the place. That was a lot of work. And I noticed that I could not enjoy the monastery in which I lived. To me, that was my work camp. I was always at the core of others. So you know what I did? I decided at that time, every Monday, especially Monday morning, to have time off. What I meant by time off, I could walk through that monastery, but I was not the abbot. So somebody else, we're looking for Ajahn Brahm, where is he? I said, I don't know. I can't resist this story. There was, like a lot of times in those old times, I loved working, because I was just another monk. And so we were laying concrete somewhere, and I was really into it. And when I finished with the concrete work, before lunch, had to go to my room to get a shower. But before I got to my room, honestly, I thought it was an ice cream van coming. And what's an ice cream van doing coming to the monastery? But when I sort of approached close, it wasn't an ice cream van. Please excuse me, I'm not racist. This was a Sri Lankan lady wearing expensive sari with so many clanging jewelry on her. They went ding, 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 ding. And I don't usually hear that noise, so I thought it was an ice cream van. But it was this quite sort of a high-class Sri Lankan lady. She was really dressed up. And so when she saw me, she came up and asked me. He said, this is honest, this is almost exactly true. She asked me, I'm looking for Ajahn Brahm. Do you know where Ajahn Brahm is? Thinking quickly, I said, if you go to the Dharna Sala where the monks have their lunch, you'll probably be down there in about 20 minutes. Oh, thank you, she said, and off she went. So I went and had a shower, put on some clean robes instead of work clothes, and went to talk with her. And I can't believe just how easy it is to fool people. Because we had a nice chat, and at the end of the chat, before she left, she said, thank you very much, it's really inspiring. And you have a beautiful monastery, but, she said, if you don't mind me telling you, I was met by one of your monks, and he was very badly dressed. Honestly, she didn't realize it was the same monk. Me. And again, thinking quickly, I said, I will have a word with him about it afterwards. Thank you, well done. So sometimes you do talk to yourself. So I can't lie. So anyway, why was that the case? Because she had an expectation of what a monk is, or like a monk like Ajahn Brahm. And what she saw didn't fit her expectations. But afterwards, when I cleaned myself up, that fit the expectations. She thought it was two different people. I kind of like that story. That's why I keep telling it. I don't know if you've heard it before, but I will keep on telling it because I enjoy listening to it. But that's why I try that as much as I can. Just so I can appreciate. And that once I stopped taking responsibility for anything, and I told the monks as well, if you're about to disrobe, I'm not going to stop you on Monday mornings. Actually, I shouldn't say that, should I? Otherwise, people always disrobe on Mondays. No way. So what that did was, it did work as I expected. Then on Mondays, the monastery looked much more beautiful. And that's what I got that insight up. If you own something, anything, it's always a problem. If you think you own the monastery, it's a problem. If you own Jhana Grove because you're one of the caretakers, you can't relax. You can't appreciate the beauty of the place. If you own Nolamara, especially the office buildings, because you are the admin officer, and you won't enjoy it as much as if you just visit. just hang out. It's amazing. If you own your meditation, why do you always call it my practice? If you own it, there's always things to improve. There's always things to criticize. There's always things to mend. And imagine if you don't own the practice. You just meditate, that's all. You just let go. You take no responsibility. Can you do that? Instead of taking responsibility, if things don't go how you expected, blame me. That's why I always say you can always ask for your money back. You've heard that, me say that before, haven't you? You don't get it back ever. But you can always ask. In other words, that when you don't own things, then we can let things go. When you don't let things go, then all the things you wanted, when you strived and struggled, they come to you naturally. It can't go any other way. It's a natural process. You let things go and you feel free. It's amazing how difficult it is to accept freedom. Imagine a prisoner in jail, 20 years, 30 years in prison, and they're going to be released this afternoon. How old are you now? Imagine so many years stuck in the jail of samsara, and this afternoon, these gorgeous nimittas of eyes, you don't know where, you didn't ask for them, they just came, and you started getting these deep meditations, blissing out, and you come out afterwards, and the whole door exiting samsara is open to you. How many of you can take it? It's a lovely way of describing it, using the simile of the prisoner. You can have a free day. Why not? That's why I often say to the monks, you've heard me say this many times before, Ananda over there, or the Venerable Mudu here, or the nuns as well. If you get in a deep meditation, you don't need to come for lunch. You don't need to do any of the chanting. You can even sort of, be free from any patimokkha or anything else which goes on. Enjoy. That's what we're here for. So a lot of times, someone doesn't turn up for one of our meetings, and we all say, "Oh, he must be in jhana." Then we found out he just fell asleep. But sometimes it happens, and that's great. This is a natural thing. So one does not need to will, let me experience nibbida and fading away. It is natural that one who is virtuous experiences nibbida and fading away. It's actually, this has got a lot of typos in this one. When one experiences nibbida and fading away, one does not need to will, let me realize liberation, enlightenment. It is natural. The one who experiences nibbida and fading away realizes liberation. You don't have to do it. It just happens. You can't avoid it. And I kind of love that idea that enlightenment is a natural process. You don't have to will and strive and struggle. You can't stop it. It's like running downhill and you lose control, or you abandon control, and then you go down to the bottom. No other thing can happen, but it's perfectly safe and happy. That's why a lot of times we always feel we need to do something. Don't. Let go. Relax to the max. That's why in all these situations when, I love those situations when people become enlightened. And how many people don't become enlightened? Why? Because they're trying too hard. Not too hard, they're just trying. When I say, whenever you think you try to improve your meditation? First of all, it's not you. We're abandoning our sense of self and ownership. And also, we stop this trying business. When you stop trying, peace, that's all that's left. It's like a default state. But how Ajahn Brahm described it, this is how he described his insight into this path. He used to point out, we don't have windows here, over in Thailand, most of the teachings were done outside. So, you could see all the time the leaves on the trees and the bushes in the forest. He always would say, those leaves only flutter, they only move because something is disturbing it. It's the wind. And once the wind stops, do the leaves stop moving? It takes them a while for the momentum to wear out, and then the leaves stop moving. They're perfectly still. He said, why? This is where Ajahn Brahm used the Thai word, it's tamadā. It's like the natural state. These days we call it the default state of the mind. This is the default state of a leaf. When the wind is not moving, is not sort of agitating the leaves, they become still. You don't have to hold them still. You let them be still. Don't disturb them. They become still all by themselves. And at that time I kind of didn't like that simile. Because everything I'd ever achieved in my life before, you had to work for it, to strive for it, to make it happen. Even these buildings here, you had to work very hard. But then, once they're built, is it finished now? No, now you have to repair it. Now you have to improve it. Now honestly, the huts which I built over in Bodhinyana Monastery, I worked really hard trying to make sure every hut was pretty much the same. I did that so that no monk would say, I want a better hut. They were all the same. And then, once I built enough, that's when some monks say, no, we can do better than this. So they did renovations. From big windows to small windows. From high ceilings to concrete ceilings. We put concrete ceilings up there simply because there was always mice and other animals would go in those ceilings. And when you had a concrete ceiling, it meant that number one, it was much safer from bushfires, and number two, whatever animals wanted to come up and play, in your ceiling space, they could. In the old days, I don't know why it was like the mice and anything else which crawled up there, they'd always go up there, be silent until you went to bed. And when you went to bed, lay down, that's when they start playing. So they always disturb you. And that's just like animals being animals. And it's their home we're moving into. So when we put like these concrete ceilings there, they could play up there as much as they want, and we could never hear them. So okay, you can see that, that's a good thing. But the story which I read, which really pointed out what's going on, was the story of the bhikkhuni who was living in a cave. Please excuse me for repeating this. This is such an amazing story which explains, our modern world and commerce and GDP and everything else like that. So this particular story, there was a bhikkhuni in a nice cave. She'd go on alms round, get plenty of food, and live such a simple, peaceful life. But when she would come back from alms round, most days she would find that a mouse had bitten a hole in one of her robes. And so instead of being able to meditate or take a rest after lunch, she had to mend the hole with stitching it up. And then after a while, she got a bit fed up with this. Why do I have to keep working so much? And then, do you know that feeling? And then she thought, she got like an insight. If I find a cat, just a little cat, they're very nice, they don't eat much, but even the smell of the cat in my cave would actually keep the mice out. So she, you asked the villagers, is there any spare cats around? And there was this little cat who'd just given birth to kittens. So she got one of those kittens. They're very nice to play with, just stroke it and just sit on your lap. But the most important thing was the smell of the cat kept the mouse away. So she didn't need to spend time mending her robes. But then, the cat needed food. And the cat doesn't just eat rice and curry. So the cat needed some milk. So she asked her supporters, is it possible to get some milk for my cat? So every day, the villagers would give her a little bottle of milk for her cat. And whatever else she could get for the cat. And that was just such a burden, always asking for milk every day. She felt quite guilty. So she thought, instead of actually asking for milk from the villagers, is there waste that coming up soon? Let's have a fundraiser, and a purpose for the fundraiser is to get a cow. Once the cow belongs to the bhikkhuni, then you can get milk anytime. You don't have to keep bothering the lay people for milk. So they had a cow. Is there enough space at Dhammasara for a cow? But then it's not just, you can't keep the cow in the cave together with the cat. So you had to get a field, for the cow. So she again, on the next fundraising, which was the start of the rains retreat, that somebody actually donated a field for the cow. And so she would go there every day after alms round, milk the cow, and to bring the milk back for the cat, which was a lot of work. So then she thought, what if someone gives me an attendant, like a boy, who can actually look after that cow, milk it, and bring the stuff to my cave? So there was one of the boys, little boys, 10, 11 years of age, he was really misbehaving. And the parents thought, if we could let him stay with the nun to do all these chores, I'm sure he'd get much better in associating with good people. So they loaned the boy to the nun, and the boy was there to milk the cow and to take the milk to the bhikkhuni to feed the cat to keep the mouse away. But then you can't have the boy staying in a cave with the bhikkhuni, so decided to actually build a little hut outside the cave where the boy could stay to look after the cow and to keep the paddock well watered, and to bring the milk to the nun to feed the cat to keep the mouse away, so she didn't need to patch her robes. But then that's still not good enough, because it's not just having a little hut for the boy outside. The boy does need to make sure he gets well looked after with health, and also to some studies as well. So the bhikkhuni was teaching the boy arithmetic and English and some history and other good things, and doing that and building the hut for the boy, so the boy could look after the field and milk the cow and bring the milk back to feed the cat to keep the mouse away, so she didn't have to mend her robes. And then one day, somebody saw that bhikkhuni on the way to talk to the builders about this hut, and they asked her a question about Buddhism. You know what she said? "I'm sorry, I'm too busy." And at that, she realized her big mistake. Because she was working so hard to get this hut built and teaching this boy so he could look after the field and milk the cow to bring the milk to the cat, so the cat would keep the mice away, so she didn't need to mend her robes every day. And she saw that that's the way that we think in our world. So immediately she dismantled the hut, sent the boy back home, not sold the cow, gave the cow away and the field, and sent the cat to another home somewhere. And then she had no responsibilities. She went on alms round, and when she went on alms round and came home, she found the cat had also come. Another cat found out the mouse had also come home, and there was a big hole in her robes, and she happily just sewed a patch on it. And that's the end of the story. Why is it we think if we can improve this or do that, life will get better? Have you ever noticed it gets more complicated? So, okay, you have to put a road in there. And they're doing a road works over in the Albany monastery because people get stuck on that road. They can't come to the top. But honestly, when we raised some funds for that road, I always thought afterwards, what am I doing? Because when I went to visit there, no one could get in. They couldn't get up the road. It was, and it was so peaceful. And I thought, I'm destroying your peace and happiness. I kind of thought like that.
Darikers agree with that as well.
Well, they have to work it, yeah.
There's something good about that road not being tracked.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. And that story made it very clear. Now that is called insight. Insight which is practical, which is works. And it gives you more time to meditate. So, when you get home, and you want to make a nice meditation room for yourself somewhere. Sometimes it's just, get too distracted by sights. Wear the eye shades. Too much distraction from noise. They've got these great noise-cancelling headphones these days. You put a couple of those on, and you can actually meditate anywhere. What else do you need? And you've got aches and pains in your body, get one of these flotation tanks. You meditate in there and you get into jhana so quickly. But if you do get into jhana, make sure you know how to open that tank. You don't actually forget that. And life can be so easy. Or we can make it complicated. Why do we always want to do improvements? The best improvement is be very happy just sewing a patch in your robes. Am I true to my word? Oh, it's not this one. Where's the patch? You can see the patch in the background. There you go. See? I'm not a hypocrite. I sew patches in my robe. But you know what sometimes people do? They see I've got a patch in my robe and say, Ajahn Brahm, can I offer you a new robe? No! I like my patch in my robe. The difficulty sometimes is if you go overseas and go through the immigration, and you say, what are you? Are you a tramp? You've got patches in your robe. So sometimes I tell people, I think I told Ajahn Brahm that, he used to have this robe with lots of patches in. And I sort of told him, look, some of the places you go through in the immigration, if you haven't got like a persona which people remember, like, I can always take this with me. Ajahn Brahm, you see, that's me. Well, no, not that one, I mean this one. So I can support myself. And then again, otherwise they'll refuse you entry. I don't know what... I shouldn't get political. No. Let's go back to the simplicity. And if it really is insight, how do you know it's insight? You always ask me, how do you know it's like jhanas or nimittas? How do you know it's real insight? Because the result of insight, what it does, it makes you peaceful. The peace is how you can know that you've found some insight. And how do you know what peace is? Peace is the cause of seeing things as they truly are. They kind of dance together. You know insight by how peaceful it makes you. You know peace by how much insight keeps coming up. The two work together that way. One is the cause of the other. And you feel more and more free. All these little stories, no matter what you are as a monk or whatever, sometimes people will see the wrong thing and they'll criticize you. Is there anyone here who's never been criticized? I remember once, just to make the point, this was years ago in Dhammaloka, when there were lots of scandals about Thai monks who had mistresses, were breaking their precepts. There's no doubt about that. And so I remember one evening at Dhammaloka, I decided it was time to make my confession. And I looked at the audience, I said, you've heard about all these news articles, even in gets to West Australia, about some monks who are misbehaving. And I said, honesty is such an important part of monastic life, and I have to be honest with you. And I said, I looked at the mat in front of me. I never looked at people, because if you're ashamed, you don't actually look at people. I'm not a bad actor. So I looked to the ground and said, honestly, I spent some of the happiest hours of my life in the loving arms of another man's wife. We kissed, we hugged. I loved her. Okay, I'm a naughty monk, but not in the way that suggests. You see, when the people that first heard this, they all went incredibly quiet. You could actually almost read their minds. Oh no, not Ajahn Brahm as well. Oh no. And a few people were heading for the door. And I lifted up my head and said, that woman I love so much, that was my mum. Is in the loving arms of another man's wife. My dad's wife. We are. And that was a wonderful little story to show how, it all makes sense, but why is it we interpret it this one way and there's another explanation to that, what happened? Totally innocent. That's why I'm always a bit concerned if you're on Bunbury Beach, just meditating quietly, you wake up, but you come out of meditation, there's two young 17-year-olds in bikinis sitting right next to you on the beach. So sometimes you have to be very careful as a monk. So because of these things, the insight tells you that don't just judge so quickly. Anyone who's harmed you, hurt you, abused you, the more we suffer from that, the more we are allowing them to abuse us. And please excuse me for telling this story, which is one of those stories which it fits in here, so that's why I'm going to tell it. That there was a group of people who would come to Dhammaloka Centre in Noramara, and they said they were psychologists, qualified sort of in treating trauma. And they said, I love the way they said this, they said we get our permission to teach and do our healing from the universities, but they actually said all of the important stuff we get from being Buddhists and listening to the teachings here in Dhammaloka. And they said, can we please invite you to our centre? And their centre was this group and they called themselves ASSETS, ASSETS, Australian Society of Survivors of Torture and Trauma. And have you heard me talk about this before? Oh my goodness, that's my fault. Because this particular society was dealing with people who've come from overseas, who've really been tortured in these underground military camps or somewhere because of political affiliation or whatever. And ladies have been multiply raped for no reason. Boys who've been beaten and raped. This was real. And the Australian government, will give you that refugee status. So physically you are free, but emotionally you still have these flashbacks to these torture camps where you're abused, you've got no power to protect yourself and no way of getting any recompense. You're given physical safety in Australia, but the emotional pain is still there. And this group are actually dealing with that emotional pain. How can you deal with it? And a couple of these people, again, they come to Nolamara Centre. You know them really well. So they invited me to their place. And when I went there, I saw, some of the things they were doing. And one of their most successful methods was called opening the door of your heart. Where did you get that one from? And they told me how it works and how it's possible to heal that pain of trauma and to see some of the people who have been through that trauma, personal anecdotes. It was really quite moving. Through insight. So, number one, they had to feel safe. That was one of the toughest things that these psychologists, healers were doing, creating a sense of trust so they could allow this process to happen. It did involve a little bit of meditation. Sit on the chair, close your eyes, which was a tough one. Didn't know what was happening. So when they closed their eyes, they were asked to imagine sort of a double door in the middle of their heart region, just like these doors. And imagine they've been closed for a long time. Now imagine those doors being opened. And you can see inside your heart is that girl, that boy, who was happy, playing around in the village or messing around, playing soccer somewhere with their friends. And the part of them which they could accept and be at peace with, that was actually in their heart. But then they looked down at the ground, and on that cold concrete with no shelter, alone, was that young girl who was raped for no reason, the boy who was beaten senseless, other way around too. And you see, that's you, so many years ago. It's so hard to look at that, it's so painful. And the next thing you do, you imagine a staircase coming down from your heart to the ground. And then you call out to that part of you you're afraid of, which you've tried to get rid of for so many years, so you can live a life free from those memories, but you can't. Instead you invite them in. Little girl so abused and so frightened, so hurt. You say to yourself, the door of my heart is fully open to me. Come up, come in. That takes a huge amount of courage. But you've got no choice. And that little girl, so bruised, so frightened, is welcomed in. Come in. She walks up, comes into your heart. I will never discriminate against you and trying to think that you don't belong with me. Come in. Instead of trying to get rid of the past, this is kind of welcoming it. That's why I often say the way to let go of the past is be kind to it first of all. Be so welcoming to it. And then when it comes in, there's many more little boys or girls have to also come up those stairs. And the result of that was actually quite amazing. Not quite, but incredibly amazing. Because some of those people who've had their trauma healed that way, from this group, they come over to Dhammaloka Center. I remember this one lady, I forget what Eastern European country she'd been tortured and traumatized and multiple raped in. And she was telling one of our members, this young man, her story. And it's really hard to hear. But then once she was finishing, this young man quite naturally said, "That's disgusting, that's terrible what happened to you." I think those are the words he used. And this lady looked at him and said, "No, don't use those words. Terrible, disgusting. This is who I am. And I don't hurt from it anymore." She was actually free. There's so much of that, my simile, the poo, the dung, which has made me a much wiser, kinder person. It was painful, I don't recommend that to anybody, but I'm through it. And the fact that it can be done. And I mention that to people. I'm sure that many things which happened to you in your past you would rather had not happened to you. But it did. You can let go of it. It's a beautiful way of how. By being kind to it, inviting it in, embracing it. And then for that kindness, it gets so weak. You don't even think about it anymore, not because you're trying to suppress it, and that doesn't come up. So that was the work which is group assets do. And that was like an extra blessing of that booklet, or the title of the book, Open the Door of Your Heart, unconditionally. Doesn't matter what happens, let it in. It's a tough thing to ask. But when you can do it, and you tell these stories of people who have, women like that, men like that become heroes. Little saints coming into Nolamara. I want them to give the talk, not me. Anyway, that's what insight means to me. Of course, it's the insights which give you powerful enlightenment experiences. What is enlightenment anyway? Things disappearing, being free. So free, you're like being free from school. Once you've graduated, do you need to go back to school again? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I won't do a he this time. if it was demeaning. Thank you anyway. If anybody, how many of you would like one of these books, sell books? Quite a few.
Give me a box and I'll put it out for them.
Excellent, great, yeah. There are some mistakes in it, not sort of Dharma mistakes, but just bad spellings or mispronunciation, not mispronunciation, bad.